Hello and welcome to another installment of Alumni Talk and the second show in the series of Where Are They Now? And today we are lucky enough to have members of the 1963 spring track team, which is down in CHS history and lore. These gentlemen that are seated here were part of a team that set all sorts of records, and that some of them weren't broken for many, many a year. And if I'm correct in saying this, I believe that Carl Olson has a record that will never be broken.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
And why was that, Bruce?
Because when we ran, you ran the 220-yard dash, and now they run the 200-meter.
And on the straightaway.
And it was on a straightaway, and then now they run it on the curb. And I'll tell you, if he'd have run 200 meters, you still might not be able to break the records that he set.
Right. Okay, and so we have the coach who happened to be in his first year of coaching after following a very successful coach, John McGuire. And Mr. Quinn, Coach Quinn, could you tell us what it was like to come in first year and to follow a John McGuire?
Well, first off, the team was poised already for a state championship. They had been running for 3 years together. This was the fourth year. And they knew when I came in, I couldn't believe the confidence that they had that they were going to be state champs. And I just had to make sure I didn't screw it up. But they had we had a very, very talented team. Not only seniors, but juniors as well. And they all came through. We were state champs, Class C, 1963. So what a way to start your career of coaching and teaching.
So Captain Jim O'Shaughnessy, what was it like running for a first-year coach after running for John McGuire for 3 previous years, I guess?
Well, I think the interesting thing about it, Bob, was both coaches came out of BC, and they both had run at BC, and so their methods were basically the same. And one thing I will say about Mr. Quinn is he never took full responsibility for what we did. He always went back to Coach McGuire and gave him his due, because this team actually started, track actually started with our freshman year. So we were the first team to actually go through here 4 years. And like Ed said, you know, we were primed to win a state championship. And the main reason being, I mean, a lot of us did run just cross country and track, but we had a lot of other guys, Hank Brown, Artie House, who Hank was the captain of the basketball team, obviously a big scorer in the state meet. Artie House, captain of the football team. And they all came out in the spring and made us a much better team than we would have been without them.
So Arthur Johnson, did you tell us, did you start in your freshman year with John McGuire and run all the way through?
No, I started my sophomore year. Track was it's almost like a club organization, I think, the first year. And in fact, if I remember right, that first year, some of the high schools to compete against brought phys ed classes over to compete and beat the track team. So it's kind of humiliating. So I think there was a sense of a junior and certainly senior year to kind of return in kind. Lowell especially, I think the meet we had against them, they scored 3 points, which is pretty hard to do with there's so many points available on the track meet. But they had really laid it on pretty thick as to how badly we were trained and how badly we did. And that was a little bit of a driving force to kind of, here's the payback now, here's what you get for doing this. I don't think we try to rub it in, but you didn't hold back. You did your best. Well, we didn't say anything, but you ran your best. You didn't run half speed because this was the team you knew you were going to dominate. You ran your best. You were running against the clock and really against each other. And so that kind of was the motivating factor. I think another thing that we should bring out is we actually won 2 state championships. There was a relay championship in the spring. The teams competed in. We won that as well. So we were twice state champions that same spring. So it was a pretty good spring.
Good, good. And Bruce McMaster. Did you run all 4 years?
I did not. I was recruited by Jim in the back row, in the balcony at St. Mary's Church, at a CCD class, which is probably a terrible thing. We're probably going to go not to heaven because of that. But he just kept working on me every week, and he said, you know, you're going to love it. You're a great bunch of guys and so forth. And I came out, and I mean, I was a rookie my junior year, and total acceptance.
Good.
That's a pretty neat thing. That is, here's a kid coming in they knew nothing about. I thought I was pretty fast, and wow. I wound up my senior year at the Class C meet, finishing third in the 100-yard dash. I probably was the 7th or 8th fastest guy on the Chelmsford High team.
Wow.
Yes.
They were that
and
good.
I mean that. They were that good. Yeah.
So, Coach Quinn, when did you know that the 63 track season was going to be outstanding and go down in history?
When they told me. Like I said, I was impressed by their confidence, and as I get to see them, especially through cross country, and saw that we had great runners like Jimmy, that we had certainly distance runners, and we worked out in the winter. Remember, we didn't have a team.
No.
We ran in a couple of meets down at the was it the Armory and at
Fargo
the
building.
Fargo building, and I think we ran at the
garden.
YMCA, I believe, in
Yep.
that circular track above.
Kirk's
And-
Trained on
Mechanics.
Western Road, up and down.
Yes,
that
up and
damn
down
hill
in the
with
parking
pole.
lot.
Trained in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but they were committed. They were out there running in the winter when we really didn't have a team, and so they were getting primed for the spring. So I was convinced, like I said, unless I screwed it up, that we had enough people in all the events that we were going to do very, very well in state competition.
How about the rest of you gentlemen? When did you know, feel it in your bones, that you were going to be good?
At our first meeting with him, he had a general meeting. I don't know who was there, if it was all the guys or just those who weren't on sports teams in the fall. But he sort of said if we didn't win, we'd be held to account because the potential's there, and it was kind of like, ooh, hadn't heard that before. But we kind of thought pretty good about our chances. I knew what we were doing in terms against the clock, and you could see what the other teams were doing. So
But you also, we from sophomore year on, I mean, this team virtually, I don't believe we ever lost a dual meet.
just to remember the guy who was the
Well,
coach from
Reading in
Sheehan.
last year. But you could see how good we were going to be, even as sophomores. I mean, we had an outstanding team as a sophomore. Juniors, we ran up against St. John's Prep. That was our Achilles heel, and that drove us to be, when we were seniors, to beat St. John's Prep. That was our main goal, and to win a state championship. And I can remember back then they had a guy who used to, before the meet was actually held, would give his idea of who was going to win that meet, and he had St. John's winning. He had me coming in second. I think you guys probably third, fourth, or fifth. And he predicted that we would not win the state meet. So that was nice to show him how wrong he was. So.
I also, doing a little bit of research here, that the 62 team finished second on the state meet in
In the relays.
Belmont relays.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And then Hank Brown won 2 events at the state meet.
Hank was he was a multiple guy. Yeah, I don't know. For Pete's sake, he went out and threw the shot put for the first time in his life, I think, right? And,
Yeah,
on
And he
dual
won the
meets.
hurdles,
Yeah,
and we didn't compete in the hurdles. But we had some hurdles, but in our league, hurdles was not one of the events. So he took maybe a week or so of training before the state meet, and he won the first place in the hurdles in the state meet.
Yeah.
So
It was quite.
I might also add, by the way, that the assistant coach is Paul Murphy. Paul played a very big part in the formation of these fellas. He coached, for the most part, weights, the discus and
Yep.
shot put and that sort of thing.
And he
But
was
the
with-
week of the Belmont relays, I came down with a kidney disease, kidney infection. and I was in bed. In those days, you stayed in bed for a week, and the doctor came to your house. That's how old I am. And Paul had to take care of the team, so we talked on the phone a few times about workouts and who was doing what. But Paul should get some credit for that. He
Oh,
was
yeah.
the
Yeah, I know.
absolutely.
he was the coach.
He was involved from the beginning, too, I
Yeah,
think, right?
he was, yeah.
Coach McGuire's assistant
That's right.
back when we were freshmen, so, yeah.
Now, in looking at the yearbook, I found that most of you gentlemen had some type of nickname. Bruce, I saw you, it says the cynical sprinter.
The what?
The cynical sprinter.
Oh, yes, that's
And
my
what-
personality.
Now, what was that? How did you end up with that?
I guess I always had that kind of attitude, and maybe in the classroom and so forth and so on, and it carried over. My official nickname was given me by Uncle Guy, Don Staley. He called me Flash.
Oh, I see. Yeah, okay.
That's more fitting.
You prefer that
It
one.
was flush. You thought it was
Yeah, I just thought. Yes.
And Arthur, I've known you only by Nipper for years. Where did that come from?
Actually, that was my name before I was born. There's an interesting little story. My dad was not in the wave of D-Day, but 3 days later. He was in Intelligence Corps heading across, but he'd written to my mother as they were about to go, you know, hope we get out of this, you know, we'll see what happened. While he was in London, or in the environs, as part of their training, they were helping with bombed out areas of the city. They needed the personnel, you get used to, you know, some of the horrific parts of what war would be. And early on in his assignment there, they came in a building, it was going to go up in flames, it was just a loss. The man came running out of the building, come in, we got to get the Nipper, got to get the Nipper. No, you know, there's no way no one's going in. And he was just hysterical. So they were worried, maybe there's some artifact that's valuable, we got to find out. They called back to headquarters, and they talked to, so Nipper, that's the name for a little boy in England. There must be a boy in there, and there was, and he saved him.
Really?
And so he wrote to my mom, and if I ever get out of this, and we ever have a son, it'd be nice if we could name him Nipper. So that was my name, you know, as it was a boy, bingo. And I used it pretty much. I didn't use it professionally. I made a command decision the first day of school that if I used it with my colleagues, the kids would get it,
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
would be the end. So professionally, and you know, my writing. But I still use Nipper. My wife only knows me as that. She's gotten around to using art and talking to people. We had a reunion just recently, and she started talking to people about art this, art that, and I said, no one knows who art is. She said, "Oh, yeah, that's right." You know, so you could tell if someone called.
Yeah.
Was Nipper home? Is our home? Dr. John? You know, different, whatever they said, you know who called if they didn't leave a message.
Right, right.
So I still use it. Absolutely.
Good. And Jimmy?
I don't think I had a nickname, did I?
Well, I know, but there was one thing in there about one of the 3 O's. Is that because there were other people that were O something?
Well, we had Carl Olson,
O'Brien,
and,
Obie Bay, right?
yeah, must have been.
Yeah, it must have been from, because he was a year ahead of us, but he
Yeah.
was the captain.
Oh, no, his brother was in our class.
Oh, yeah, Wayne, but
Yeah,
I'm
Wayne
thinking
O'Brien, yeah.
because of the cross country.
That was in the yearbook?
Yep.
Oh, Jesus. I don't know.
Sometimes he was called Ocean,
Yeah. Ocean, that's what I remember. yeah.
and thanks to Jim Parker, sometimes called the Cat, which Parker was
Yeah.
also called.
Yeah, that was
A lot of nicknames back then.
Yeah, I saw Jimmy Parker was the cat.
Yep,
Yeah, he was.
He's the official
that's
Cat.
what he's got.
Okay, now, I know that my participation in some sports and the coaching and whatnot, you see people in different lights. You know, you see your coach outside of the classroom, you know, and the coach sees you outside of the classroom. How did that influence you guys? I mean, there must be some fond memories you have of Coach Quinn, the camaraderie on the team that stay with you today.
They probably discussed how to fatten me up. That a good meal would probably kill me, because that's what I used to have to contend with all the time. Because, like I said, I was 120 pounds, I think, when I started teaching.
I think the big thing about the class of '63, and you know, I'm not going to say '64 didn't help us out, but class of '63, we went to everybody's events. I mean, you know, when the football team was playing football, we were there, and when Hank Brown was scoring all kinds of points and the basketball team was winning the state championship, we were there. And And when we were running our outdoor season, there were many, many people who knew absolutely nothing about track who began to follow us. And the one guy who I will always remember is, who's the writer for the Parker George.
Parker George.
Parker George wrote for the Chelmsford News Weekly. And he took us on. I mean, you know, he wanted to make sure that we would never be forgotten. And he wrote an article just about every meet we had. And, you know, there were a lot of meets. And the one I remember most, I know we talked about Lowell, but was Drake. You know, they talked all year long, all spring long, about how they were undefeated and that they were going to take us down. And, you know, I mean, nobody on our team thought there was ever a chance of that happening, and certainly it wasn't, because the final score ended up being like 78-3, I believe. And this was an undefeated team, and their coach was the football coach at Drake at Murphy. Remember him?
Yep.
And he thought that they were going to take us down, and it just wasn't even close.
Part of our problem in the dual meets was that we often couldn't run our A team out of compassion.
Yeah.
I mean, we had kids swapping and running different events. We had, you know, kids who had never run a half before running a half mile, or, you know, maybe the 220 guy ran the quarter, or, you know, we had different just to try to even out so it wasn't a demolishing. Because, like I said, we had legitimately 6 guys who could win any dual meet in the quarter. We even threw Hank Brown, who was a high jumper, in the quarter, and he won it. You know. So I might, by the way, throw in another name. Our manager at the time, Bump Hadley, Steve Hadley, was our manager. And when you're coaching, especially a new guy like myself, he was my manager for cross country.
Carl and I.
Carl and Bruce broke me in.
We were sizing up the coach.
Yeah.
For the
I always
spring.
felt they had something up their sleeve. I wasn't quite sure, but
But you couldn't get him
but
to
they were
run
good.
a distance?
No. He didn't know what lap meant. He didn't. He
I
really
ran a
didn't.
quarter mile, I thought.
No, yeah, he thought that was a marathon.
All right, so Bruce, you were a sprinter.
Yes.
You didn't do the quarter, though. You
No, I ran
100, 200?
100 and 220.
220.
Yeah, and relay 4x1. I did a little long jumping, but that was just for exercise because
Didn't go too
Artie
long.
House was the best long jumper, plus 20, well over 20 feet, and walked away with every meet. Brian Popalizio from your class was
Yeah, Brian was
second on our team, but third in the entire Class C at the state meet. So, I mean, it was just, the talent was frightening. I mean, you had Hank Brown, could beat anybody, but so could Richie Malloy.
Yep.
I mean, he was
Another
just-
basketball player, yeah.
He
well,
was
you know,
second, he was second to Hank, but he was second or third in the state meet.
Yeah, Richie was in my class.
Artie House was the best quarter miler. Nipper was the second best quarter miler, but third best quarter miler in all of Class C. I mean, it was frightening. Just to emphasize what Jimmy said about Drake, because Murphy did have an abrasive personality. He talked about Hank doing the shot put. That day, everybody was out of the high jump early, and Hank was a high jumper. Hank never jumped till everybody else was out, and then he'd come over and he'd win it. He was at the shot put, which was way across the field, the back end of McCarthy. And Murphy made the decision that if he didn't jump in 3 minutes, he would be disqualified, and the results would be as they were. So Nipper ran all the way from the high jump area to the shot put area and said, Hank, you got to come over here. They're going to disqualify you if you don't jump. Hank ran from the shot put area without even a hesitation, jumped the high jump, and that was back, there was no flop then. You rolled over to sawdust. Won the event by doing that, ran right back to the shot put area, never even looked at Murphy, and the veins were standing out on Murphy. It was just a fun day.
That would have given them 9 points, though, you know,
Yes,
Drake.
oh, yeah.
So, I mean, they were looking forward to making sure that Hank didn't make it, yeah.
So we were competitive.
You think?
With each other.
Nipper, so you quarter miler?
Quarter mile.
And
But I was undefeated in the half mile. I only ran at one meet. I didn't run a very good time. I said, no, this isn't his event, but I won. I never ran it again. And I ran a 2:20 leg on the half-mile relay.
I think I timed you in an hourglass.
Just
didn't I?
well, hey, I beat everybody else. That was all that
That's all that counts. Yeah. They don't ask you how, they ask you what.
I
And
didn't,
Jim,
I
you-
didn't run that day, I
Nope.
guess. No.
You were sick?
Okay.
Decided to
You
put a
were
ringer in the
on-
half-mile.
I was in the half
Distance
mile,
man.
quarter mile. You know, I mean, when the big meets came, we doubled up. I mean, you know, when we needed a relay, I ran the mile relay. Nipper ran the mile relay. Artie House ran the mile relay. And Carl. Yeah, I
Yep.
mean, you know, it's.
All right, so as we wrap up here, we're
Peter McHugh.
we're
I
coming to
think,
the end.
Threw in a few times.
I'd like to find out, you know, after high school. So let's start with Bruce and go right around. College,
All right.
career-wise.
Okay. I went to Massachusetts College of Pharmacy. Mr. Simonian made it plain that he needed somebody to go to medical school, somebody to go to dental school, somebody to go to pharmacy school so that his health needs would be taken care of in his later life.
Well, 63 is his
Yeah.
favorite class.
Yes, it is.
And he's one of our very favorite people, too. So I went to MCP. Late in my career, I decided I didn't really want to do retail pharmacy full-time. And others ahead of me in pharmacy school had tried teaching and liked it. So I applied, and I wound up in Tingsboro, which was just starting their junior, senior high school. And so I became a science teacher in Tingsboro. And I taught there for 35 years. And being in Tingsboro then was like being in Chelmsford when we grew up. It was a little tiny town, very tight, a lot of family relationships and so forth and so on. It was a great experience. And then they needed a cross-country coach, which was kind of funny. And I applied for that. And I wound up getting it through
Talk about irony.
strange circumstances. And I did that for 29 years. And finally, the last year, I taught my girls won the state title. And I said, I'm smart, I'm done. So it was a great experience. And a lot of it came
Hall of
from
Fame, aren't you,
high
at
school.
Tingsboro
Yes.
and in Chelmsford?
Yes,
I think everybody here is a Hall of Famer in Chelmsford.
yes.
Right.
Nipper.
I continued track for a couple of years at Tufts, Division III, but nevertheless. And then let it die pretty much. I really didn't care for running, but I was pretty good at it, but it wasn't fun. I'd much rather play the other sports. And in fact, we played in a semi-pro basketball league in Boston one year with a couple of guys that made the NBA. Yeah, they were good, but we were on the same court with them, so what the heck.
And Peter Mullendijk.
Yeah. I started teaching right away, right out of school, teaching mathematics. I was a history major, but mathematics kept you on this side of the country rather than being drafted. I should say that. So I taught mathematics and fell in with a few people who were pretty interested in doing more than just grinding out the mathematics, and discovered I could be pretty creative, and started writing, speaking all over the country, giving talks and stuff, and writing, did a lot of writing, and in the course of things, went back to school and got a PhD through a program New Hampshire had set up in honor of Chris McAuliffe. And I was one of the awardees, and they give you a year off to pursue a project, and it wasn't going to take that long, so I could do something else with it too. So I did that, and finished up at BU, and they invited me back 2 years later to join the faculty there. And that's why I did that for about 10 years, and then just writing full time. And I'm still doing some writing. I have another idea for a book, but pretty much winding down.
And a number of your books are in Author's Corner
Oh, yeah.
over at the high school.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them.
Yeah, yeah. Jimmy.
Yeah, I graduated in '63, obviously, and went to Northeastern on a track scholarship. And I am actually in the Northeastern Hall of Fame also. And after graduating, I was going to have to go into the Army because I came off the stage and I had my draft notice. But luckily, I got into a reserve unit and spent 20 years in the Army Reserves. My wife was working at Northeastern at the time as the athletic secretary, and when the job for the credit union opened up, I was in the finance area, and I went back and applied for the job, and 41 years later, I retired as the CEO of the Northeastern University Credit Union. And right now, I am retired, and I'll be retired 3 years, and I'm enjoying retirement.
Good. And Ed, we have about 10 seconds for you.
That's all it's worth.
Everybody knows.
Well, I spent 29 years at Chelmsford High. Got laid off. My job was eliminated in 1991. I became principal at Lowell Catholic for 9 years, and then principal at Bishop Girton for 4 years. So after 42 years, I retired, and I continue to be retired and enjoy my grandkids, and just so thankful that I had the association with these fellows here.
Well, thank you very, very much for a very successful Where Are They Now? Really appreciate your time and your effort, and good luck in the rest of your retirement days.
Thanks for asking us.
Nice.
It's always a pleasure. I didn't know we should be calling you Dr. Nichols.